Good evening and welcome to Pray Heal Love, the podcast, where faith meets freedom. This space was created as a safe haven for women who, like me, have been surviving spiritual warfare in a covenant with darkness. I am committed to not only uncovering and exposing that darkness, but also helping you put God first in your healing after narcissistic abuse. I am your host, Brianna Michelle. I'm a survivor of a 16-year-long battle with narcissism. I'm also a coach and a founder of Pray Heal Love, and I'm here to help you break cycles, build boldness, and begin again with God. Let's get into it. Today's episode is part 2 of last week's episode, and as promised, I really want to go in and take a deeper dive on the aspect of trauma and other generational strongholds that are often carried through bloodlines. As I said last week, there would be no way that I could speak on the things that were done to me without speaking on what lied within me that attracted or accepted it. This week, after another dream where the Lord revealed to me a feud that exists within my own bloodline between two cousins that I rarely talk to and would have no other way of knowing about, I've started to take a look back over the women in my bloodline. These are all strong, beautiful women who carried the weight of their households, survived in silence, and often chose men that didn't choose them back. There also always exists a pair of daughters in every generation. My grandmother and her sister, my mom and her sister, me and mine. Even now, me and my sister each have two girls. That pattern is generational, it's spiritual. It's been silently passing down a blueprint of pain, passivity, performance, and people pleasing. But the thing about patterns, they don't break on their own. Somebody has to stand up and say no more. I am the interruption. I may not have the support that I need. I may have walked through fire and that should have consumed me. But God, He didn't let the fire kill me. He let it refine me. One thing that God has blessed me with is a really good memory and deep spiritual insight. I have a very keen ability to see things below surface level and understand people and situations beyond the natural into the supernatural and even their spiritual intentions. For as long as I can remember, I've heard stories of my grandmother and mother being abused, both physically and emotionally, by the partners they chose. One particular time when I was around 7, maybe 8 years old, after mosque service one Sunday in Chicago, I remember begging my grandmother to take me over my mom's apartment, just a few blocks away. My grandma wanted to get home to where we live, but I would not let her go the other way to the bus stop, and instead we walked a few blocks to my mother's home. It was almost as if I could sense something was wrong. We arrived at her apartment to find the police there and her living room destroyed. I specifically remember there being a Prego jar of spaghetti sauce somewhere in that room, and my mom saying that's how she had to defend herself against her abuser. I've never witnessed my grandmother's abuse or had too much insight into her trials besides being a fly on the wall and hearing my family talk about it. But often as a young child, I would see her priming and prepping herself for when my grandmother would come over to the house to visit my mom. Again, I don't know him as a husband to my grandmother, but I do know that him and my mother were very close and he loved us kids, especially me. I thank God that my grandmother didn't allow bitterness and unforgiveness to root in her heart and still allowed a relationship to exist between them after their divorce. That's the type of woman I was raised by. They suffered through their shares of heartbreak, domestic abuse, and trauma, but they were still forgiving and showed mercy and grace just like a true child of God would, to an extent. My grandma was a lifter. She was a beautiful woman, and anyone who knows her would know she had a heart of gold, especially for children. Though she wouldn't do too much hugging, kissing, or actually saying she loved you, she would show you in gifts, acts of service, being a listening ear, or praying you through whatever issue you were facing. She always had a word from her Quran or a prayer for you. But with me at least, she never told me a personal story about her own experience that could have carried me into my adult life. Where I can say she failed was telling her daughters and granddaughters about her trials and what she learned, because to talk about it would have brought about a healing for the next generation. My mama, on the other hand, she let the trauma live in her until it unalived her. It manifested in so many different forms for her. At the time of her passing, my mama was very isolated. She showed signs of very high functioning depression, and she had let the pain of her abuse harden her to the point where it affected her interaction with her children. As bright and as funny as she often was during the good times, she suffered with unforgiveness and mental health issues, which showed up in the physical as overeating and isolation, that turned into cancer, obesity, incontinence, and other chronic health conditions. Nevertheless, my mama was a fighter. I watched her still show up, still work every day, build side hustles, and provide for herself and us up until her last day earthside. What neither one of them did, and where the curse ends with me, is that the lessons weren't taught, and they never allowed God to restore them in love. And I think that's a pattern that happens with a lot of women, is that we get stuck in the healing and never come out of it, becoming comfortable with if no one ever knew what happened or ever making themselves available for love again. Being a child of abused women is something that gives you a really rough start socially and relationally. You aren't taught boundaries or too much about self respect, so that is what forms your experiences. My mission as a mother of my two girls is to break the cycle here and now and fully equip my children with the confidence, self esteem, and God rooted identity so they are never susceptible to the experience that previous generations endured. There's also a whole other side to this story that is unknown due to me having no knowledge of my now deceased father or his family. But right here is where the Bible sat me down and reminded me just because it ran into your family doesn't mean it has to run through you. Let me take you to the word real quick. In Ezekiel 18, 1 through 4, and also 14 through 17, reading from the NIV version, it says, "The word of the Lord came to me. What do you people mean by quoting this proverb about the land of Israel? The parents eat sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, you will no longer quote this proverb in Israel. For everyone belongs to me, the parent as well as the child. Both alike belong to me. The one who sins is the one who will die." Then it goes on to say, "But suppose this son sees all the sins his father commits, and though he sees them, he does not do such things. He does not oppress anyone or require a pledge for a loan. He does not commit robbery, but gives his food to the hungry and provides clothing for the naked. He withholds his hand from mistreating the poor and takes no interest or profit from them. He keeps my laws and follows my decrees. He will not die for his father's sin. He will surely live." That right there, that part that says he sees them and does not do such things, that's where I said enough. I saw what my mama endured. I saw what my grandma accepted. And I made a decision. I will not do such things. God is not punishing me for their sins, but He's giving me a choice, a chance to live different, to choose better, to build free. So I'm breaking this thing, not just for me, but for every daughter coming behind me. I'm standing in divine permission to live healed and build freely. Because when you can see the pattern, you have a power to stop it. Now, this is how the patterns of my bloodline manifested in my own life, both pre narcissist, during the marriage, and then even now in my current life. In all honesty, and I believe a lot of women can relate, I've never experienced or witnessed firsthand a loving, healthy relationship between a man and a woman. I've seen men that were providers and men that were users, but I have yet in my 34 years of living to see a woman be truly emotionally cared for and protected by a man. In all transparency, I used to tell my ex when we first met that I was afraid of men. At 16, when I met him, I truly believed that I was a homosexual. When we first started dating, I was deathly afraid of confrontation with him and hated when he yelled at me. Knowing this gave him a sense of power and control, and he would delight in punching walls, threatening, cursing, or physically assaulting me when he didn't get his way. My mother, father, grandmother, and grandfather are all deceased now. So there exists an orphan spirit in me that I am praying to be delivered from completely. It entered through losing my mother at 15 and having no real relationship with my father. So, because I wasn't properly affirmed through love from my parents, I tolerated inconsistency, emotional abandonment, and control, telling myself at least he picked me. Maybe if I love him better, he'll love me right. There was also a time where I carried the entirety of the financial load in the household, as well as took on the role of primary parent, handling everyone's responsibility and emotions, and most detrimentally becoming a punching bag both physically and emotionally to a broken man. I remember telling him very early on that I didn't trust in his ability to provide for me and our children, so I just do it myself. Admittedly, this was probably detrimental to his becoming as a man, but my hyper independence said I can't trust him to lead, so I'll lead and hope he follows. I silenced myself often to keep the peace. I hid my voice, my dreams, and constantly withdrew my boundaries to not cause conflict in the home. That orphan spirit told me that if I speak up, he'll leave, or I'll start another war and end up manipulated, gaslit, or left questioning if I was the problem. I also stayed out of fear of being alone. I went through so much with losing people that I had become codependent on him and his validation. That orphan spirit told me that he was my only family and that something was better than nothing at all. What I've shared today and even on last week isn't just about family feuds or toxic relationships. It's about patterns. Patterns that keep replaying through generations, sometimes quietly, other times loudly. Patterns of silence, of survival, self sacrifice, and of settling. And I realized that the only way to truly heal is to see it all clearly. Not just what they did to me, but what I agreed to. Not just what my mom and grandmother endured, but what I believed I had to repeat. Not just the dysfunction in the family, but the dysfunction in me that was attracted to it. This is not about blame, it's about awareness. It's about authority. And it's about becoming the woman that none of them had the freedom to be. This week's reflection is simple. What have I inherited that I'm no longer willing to carry? Maybe it's silence. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's loving people who don't love you back. Whatever it is, ask God to help you lay it down and trust Him to replace it with something better. Next week, we shift, we pivot, we move forward. Because now that the bloodline is broken, I can finally build freely. That wraps up this week's episode of Pray Heal Love the podcast. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing, truth, and restoration. I pray today's conversation met you right where you were and left you a little lighter, a little stronger, and a little more healed and empowered. If this episode blessed you, don't forget to subscribe and come back next week. We're just getting started. Follow my socials in the description box below and tap into our growing community of survivors and faith-filled women rebuilding their lives with power and purpose. You could also grab your copy of my book, Pray Heal Love, and learn more about the mission at prayheallove.com. Remember, just because it broke you doesn't mean it gets to define you. You are becoming, you are healing, and most of all, you are deeply loved. Until next time, stay grounded in truth and wrapped in grace. This is Pray Heal Love.